After 3 years of being treated like a treasured gem, my husband changed drastically after our child was born. My mother-in-law, who had a clear preference for boys over girls, disgustingly used my breast milk as a cosmetic treatment. This cherished marriage turned out to be a conspiracy from the beginning, with everyone wishing for my downfall to seize the inheritance. But they underestimated me. I am not a meek little lamb. Chapter 1. At 5 months pregnant, the doctor advised me to exercise moderately, so I took a half-hour walk with my husband, David, in the neighborhood every evening. One evening, after returning home from our usual walk, we opened the door to find an elderly lady sitting on our sofa. My vision darkened momentarily, making me think I had entered the wrong house. "Mom, what are you doing here?" David's surprised voice came from behind me. I focused my gaze and realized that this elderly lady was my mother-in-law, Mrs. Smith, whom I had only met a few times. David and I fell in love during our university years. He had always treated me well. We hadn't planned on marrying so early, but the year we graduated, my parents died in a car accident. Losing my main support, I felt as if my world was collapsing. During that critical time, David stood by me, helped me handle my parents' funeral, and proposed to me, promising to be my lifelong family. Touched by his kindness and unwavering support, I agreed to marry him. After our marriage, I wasn't comfortable living with my in-laws, so David moved us to the city to live in the house my parents left me. We only visited his parents during holidays, usually sending money instead, which led to my unfamiliarity with my in-laws. But today, this unfamiliar person showed up at our door. "Anna is pregnant, and it's hard for you to take care of her alone. I came to help so you won't be too exhausted," my mother-in-law said, standing up from the sofa, looking a bit uneasy. I found the key under the doormat and let myself in. "You young folks shouldn't leave keys lying around. What if a thief got in?" I stood there, unable to process the situation, until David's reminder brought me back to my senses. Forcing a smile, I greeted her. "Mom." She smiled and nodded repeatedly, then asked somewhat awkwardly, "Anna, you don't mind me coming suddenly, do you?" With her already in the house, I couldn't very well ask her to leave. Smiling stiffly, I replied, "Mom, I'm thrilled you could come." She rubbed her hands together, clearly pleased, and started talking to David in their dialect. Feeling awkward, I went back to our room. When David came into the room, he seemed very happy, kissing me on the cheek and telling me he had settled his mother in the guest room. I felt uneasy. "How could your mom come here without discussing it with us first?" David's eyes flickered briefly before he smiled sheepishly, trying to comfort me. "My mom's a country woman, unaware of these social niceties. She just thought this was her son's house and came as she pleased. But she should have at least notified us. Come on, my mom's very simple. You could tell from today. Besides, isn't it better to have more help taking care of you?" David apologized profusely, even bowing, almost to the point of kneeling. Seeing David so humble, and given that his mother had not done anything excessive and seemed genuinely simple, I didn't want to put him in a difficult position. I sighed, deciding to give it a try living with her. If it didn't work out, David could handle it. To my surprise, my mother-in-law was very experienced in taking care of pregnant women. She always made the foods I liked and knew some good massage techniques, taking care of me meticulously. I wasn't a difficult person, and seeing how well she got along with me, I started to genuinely feel happy, treating her like my own mother. I often bought her expensive jewelry and clothes, and various supplements constantly flowed into our home, making her skin much more radiant. Within a month, we had developed a very good relationship, and David was especially happy, often joking that he was jealous of the bond between me and his mother. I naively believed that I had found a good mother-in-law and that our relationship was an exception to the typical horror stories about in-laws. Until one morning. Chapter 2. I usually put my laundry, including my underwear, into a designated washing machine. After running it for a while, I realized it wasn't working. 6 months pregnant, bending over to wash clothes was inconvenient for me. So, I went to the dining room to call David, who was waiting for his mother to finish cooking. David saw the laundry in my hand and understood. Just as he was about to follow me, his mother called out. She placed the last dish on the table, looking puzzled. I just finished cooking. Where are you two going? You're not planning to eat out, are you? Mom, the washing machine is broken. I asked David to help me wash my underwear. I said without thinking. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law's expression changed drastically, her face turning as dark as ink. Anna, it's one thing to be pampered, but how can you ask David to wash your underwear? A man's hands shouldn't be used for that. Washing such things will bring bad luck. I was stunned by her words, utterly shocked. Men are yang, women are yin. Men can't touch such yin things, it will harm their luck. I'll pretend I didn't see this, but there mustn't be a next time. She said coldly, a stark contrast to the woman I knew. I was furious and was about to retort when David grabbed my hand, soothingly rubbing my palm, and pulled me into the bathroom. Facing my angry gaze, David scratched his head awkwardly. My mom means no harm, she's just old-fashioned. No harm? In this day and age, men can't wash underwear because of yin energy. The internet is also called the yinternet, but no man has died from it. I said sarcastically, shaking off his hand. Anna, don't get upset, it's not good for our baby. David said, worriedly glancing at my belly. Apart from her old-fashioned beliefs, my mom has been great to you. You can't dismiss all her kindness because of one slip. I knew David had a point. Since she arrived, David had been much more relaxed. She genuinely cared for our baby, always encouraging me to eat more and assisting me whenever I needed it, fearing any harm might come to me. I couldn't just negate all her efforts because of this incident. Seeing my softened expression, David seized the opportunity, swearing and promising that his mother would never do such a thing again. Seeing his pitiful look and recalling his previous kindness, I finally relented. After that day, I don't know what David told his mother, but she agreed to let David wash my underwear and continued treating me as warmly as before. I still felt uneasy and stopped sharing everything with her. Chapter 3. At 7 months pregnant, my mother-in-law showed me the baby clothes and shoes she had made. She was very skilled, the clothes and shoes were beautiful, no less than those sold in stores. Looking at them, I felt maternal love and a pang of guilt, thinking I had been too petty about the previous incident. Just as I was about to apologize, I noticed all the clothes were blue. Mom, why are they all blue? I asked, staring at her, suspecting something but hoping I was wrong. My grandson should wear blue, she said, not noticing my change in expression. She handed me a small outfit, asking, "Doesn't this look nice for my grandson?" I gripped the clothes tightly. What if it's a girl? It can't be a girl. It must be a boy. No way it can be a girl. She screamed, jumping up from her chair like a startled chicken. Mom, boys and girls are the same nowadays. There's no need to react so strongly, I said, frowning at her, feeling angry. They're not the same. My golden grandson can't be the same as a girl. You're pregnant, how can you say such unlucky things? She hurriedly fetched some mouthwash. Spit out the bad luck. What if my grandson gets mad? I clutched my belly, stepping back, finding her irrational. Mom, you've been taking such good care of me these past months just because you think I'm carrying a boy? Aren't you a woman too? How can you look down on women? Seeing me refuse to spit, she panicked and tried to force my mouth open. Anna, spit it out. What if it really is a girl? Our family can't end with you. Her crazed behavior scared me, and I ran back to the bedroom to call David. He calmed me down and told me not to call the police, he would be home soon. Outside, my mother-in-law kept banging on the door, cursing girls, saying they were unwelcome, and even threatening eternal damnation if a girl blocked her grandson's way. Thankfully, the noise stopped after about 5 or 6 minutes. Leaning against the headboard, fatigue and disappointment washed over me, and I unknowingly fell asleep. When I woke up, I heard David's angry voice. Perhaps they thought I was deeply asleep, as their voices were clear and loud due to their emotional state. I told you to get along with her. Do you know how hard it was to get her to let you stay? After all the trouble to deceive her, this is what you do. I just got a bit upset when I heard it might be a girl. You have weak sperm, getting her pregnant wasn't easy. What if this is your only child? She cried indignantly, "It will be a boy." I asked the doctor. David said impatiently, "The house is about to be demolished, and I've got the insurance ready. Don't mess this up. Do we really have to get rid of her? What if we're caught?" She hesitated. "Maybe you should just divorce her and take the money. If I could cause her parents' accident, I can handle her too. And if she doesn't make it, the court won't give me custody of the child." David's voice turned cold and ruthless, unlike his usual self. Mentioning the child, her voice firmed up. "Got it. I won't cause you any trouble." I felt as if struck by lightning, quickly closing my eyes and pretending to sleep as their conversation ended. Sweat poured down my body and I shivered in fear. He could cause my parents' accident, so he could harm me too? That car accident wasn't an accident? The sudden crash, his timely concern and kindness, were all to lure me into his trap. Everything was a lie. All of it. I had foolishly trusted a dangerous man, sharing my bed with him and planning to raise a family together. Hatred surged inside me as I thought of my parents. I wanted to grab a knife and end this mother and son duo. But I knew I couldn't do that. I wasn't strong enough to fight them. Even if I called the police, 3 years had passed since my parents' accident. I had no evidence linking David to it. I needed to gather evidence secretly and send David to prison, making him pay for my parents' deaths. He would pay for his actions. I stayed awake all night, formulating a plan. Chapter 4. I pretended to wake up, screaming loudly in the room. "David, David! Mom wants to harm me. David, help!" David rushed in, panic-stricken. "Anna, I'm here. It's just a nightmare. Don't be scared, it's not real." Suppressing my hatred, I bit my lip until it bled, softening my voice. "David, send your mom away. I'm scared, I'm afraid for our baby." David hesitated, then smiled gently. "My mom is just old-fashioned. She wouldn't harm our baby. Don't overthink it. Let's hire a nanny. Otherwise, I'm really worried." I cried in his arms, sounding pitiful. "You're about to give birth. Where can we find a suitable nanny now? I have to work, and no one else can take care of you," David said, patting my back. "Then quit your job and stay with me," I demanded, clutching his shirt. He stiffened, immediately refusing. "If I don't work, how will we support ourselves? I don't care. I'm terrified of anything happening to our baby. If you insist on keeping your mother here, then quit your job and stay home. I'm scared of being alone with her. She was terrifying today, she wants to harm me." I cried, tears streaming down my face. I laughed coldly inside. His job, found through my parents' connections, was a well-paying position in a state-owned enterprise, something he couldn't have secured on his own. Now, let's see how he chooses. After a moment, he finally spoke. "Fine, I'll quit." Chapter 5. Ignoring his mother's objections, David quit his job and began taking care of me full-time. By this time, my belly was 8 months big. I changed from my usual accommodating self, demanding exotic fruits one day and out-of-season grapes the next. I insisted only on eating what David personally bought, believing others were out to harm me, and only his purchases were safe. Every time he went out, I made him keep a video call on, ensuring he was buying exactly what I wanted. David had no choice but to comply, barely sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night, getting thinner and more haggard by the day, his once proud face covered in acne. Of course, my mother-in-law wasn't idle either. In our 200 square meter house, I made her clean twice a day, leaving no corner untouched. If I saw dust, I would cry, claiming I couldn't breathe, almost as if I were dying. I also made her sew baby clothes and embroider designs I found online. I even bought her a plot of land in the suburbs, making her grow fresh, organic vegetables for me, saying I was worried about the safety of store-bought produce. At first, she tried to pity her son, but soon she was too exhausted to care, just hoping to reduce her workload. They even tried to take me to a psychologist. The doctor suggested I might have experienced something recently that made me feel insecure. When asked for specifics, they couldn't provide any. As my due date approached, they were both disheveled, pale, and their clothes hung loosely on their thin frames. After another errand, seeing David's dark circles, I finally showed mercy and told him I had no more cravings. He was overjoyed, collapsing onto the bed and falling asleep within minutes. Waiting quietly until his snores filled the room, I used his fingerprint to unlock his phone. Perhaps my never having checked his phone made him careless. None of his records were deleted. Going through his social media transactions and bank statements, I found a clue. There was a $30,000 transfer on his bank statement, dated the same time as my parents' accident. After photographing all the evidence, I returned his phone. Looking at his sleeping face, I felt nothing but disgust. I was blind to have lived with such scum for 3 years. Chapter 6. After 10 months of pregnancy and a single day of labor, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Even as we were leaving the hospital, my mother-in-law couldn't believe it was a girl. She cried and screamed, grabbing the doctor's collar and demanding her grandson back, threatening to sue the hospital otherwise. Even David, usually so composed, lost his cool, questioning the doctor about how he had been told it was a boy, only to end up with a girl. The doctor calmly explained, "Sir, determining a baby's gender is illegal. Umbilical cord entanglement can sometimes lead to a misdiagnosis. Every child, regardless of gender, deserves equal love and respect. Please don't hold any gender bias." David's face turned ashen. I, on the other hand, felt quite pleased, leaving the hospital with a flourish. Back home, I continued to boss the two of them around. It was obvious that both mother and son were displeased with having a girl. The quality of their work dropped significantly, and their arguments became more frequent, often filled with terms like end of the line and burden. I silently covered the baby's ears, not sure what kind of feelings to have for this poor child. Chapter 7. Using the excuse that the baby was young, I moved to a separate room from David and installed a camera in the master bedroom, citing fears for the baby's safety. When the workers came to install it, I had them also place cameras in David's and my mother-in-law's rooms, claiming it was to catch the bold thieves who had broken in several times. With enough money, the worker agreed without hesitation. That very night, the footage from my mother-in-law's room revealed something shocking. She was in a camisole dress and stockings, posing provocatively in front of her phone, striking various indecent poses. Curious, I adjusted the angle to see her phone screen and discovered she was video chatting with Mrs. Johnson's husband from next door. Mrs. Johnson was known for her fiery temper and formidable fighting skills, having caught her philandering husband with mistresses several times since we moved here. Shivering, I recorded the footage on my phone. My mother-in-law's frail body wouldn't stand a chance against Mrs. Johnson's wrath. Chapter 8. When my daughter was 2 months old, my mother-in-law suddenly insisted on feeding her. Though I didn't know her intentions, I was sure that, given David's infertility, this might be her son's only child. No matter how much she disliked it, she wouldn't harm her granddaughter. So, I gladly took a hands-off approach, expressing breast milk into bottles for her to feed the baby. During this time, David was busy gathering information about the upcoming demolition, often out and about. I contacted the officer who had handled my parents' case years ago, asking for the current situation and address of the man in prison. This information wasn't classified and had been discussed during the legal disputes back then. However, I had been too grief-stricken at the time, and David had handled everything. The officer quickly responded, and following these leads, I found the man's wife and child. The wife looked worn out, and the boy's clothes were patched up, indicating a hard life. I took a few photos from a distance with my phone. 2 days later, David excitedly brought home news about the demolition of the 2 houses my parents had left. Holding my hand, he kept muttering, Anna, I'm going to be rich, a millionaire, no, a billionaire. Anna, I'm going to be rich. Covering my mouth, I feigned excitement and quickly reminded him. The baby is still sleeping, keep your voice down. Looking at our sleeping daughter, David uncharacteristically showed a kind expression instead of his usual frown. I felt nothing but disgust, finding an excuse to send him out of the room, and then sat beside the cradle, gazing at my daughter with mixed feelings. Upon closer inspection, I realized something was wrong. She didn't look like she was sleeping but rather unconscious. I immediately took her to the hospital, where the doctor scolded me harshly. How can you call yourself a mother? Your baby is starving, and you didn't even notice? Stunned, I realized I had underestimated my mother-in-law's malice. I always left enough milk, and we had formula at home. How could she let the baby starve to the point of fainting? Furious, I stormed back home and kicked open my mother-in-law's door, finding her drinking from the baby's bottle, milk stains still on her face. Feeling nauseous, I vomited. What do you mean, just using your milk as a facial mask? She said indignantly, pushing me while I held the baby. How disgusting can you be, drinking your daughter-in-law's milk at your age? You shameless old hag! Anger consumed me, and I slapped her hard across the face. She froze, then fell to the ground, crying and wailing. Oh heavens! My daughter-in-law hit me. Is there no justice left in this world? How unlucky we are to have such a daughter-in-law. Oh, my fate! What's going on? David emerged from his room, looking annoyed at the scene. Son, your wife hit me. She wants me dead. I'll just die to make her happy. My mother-in-law clung to David's pants, crying pitifully. How can you call yourself a grandmother? Letting the baby starve to the point of fainting? This is your own granddaughter. I glared at her, wishing I could beat her to death. To my surprise, David, perhaps blinded by the impending demolition money, shouted at me. Anna, how can you talk to my mom like that? The baby was just hungry, you can feed her again. No need to hit anyone. I looked at him in disbelief. Even if everything between us was a lie, the baby was his. Was having a girl really enough to make him treat his own child like this? Your mom used my breast milk as a facial mask and even drank it herself. What's wrong with hitting her? So what if I used it as a mask? So what if I drank it? I even sent some to your father-in-law and your uncles. They all drank it. My mother-in-law said smugly, emboldened by David's support. I felt nothing but extreme disgust toward them both. It's just a girl, no different from not having one. Formula milk is fine, giving her breast milk is a waste. It's better for men to drink it. She said proudly, like a peacock. Then what's the point of you drinking it? You said you're nothing but an old hag. How dare you drink my milk? Since ancient times, babies drink breast milk, not old women. Do you want to be my daughter? I retorted, not backing down. You! She pointed at me, trembling, but David interrupted. Enough, stop arguing. It's just a small matter. Perhaps realizing it wasn't time to confront me yet, he stopped the argument and returned to his room. My mother-in-law shot me a hateful glare but said nothing more, retreating to her bedroom. Chapter 9. The next morning, I took my daughter to the agreed-upon childcare provider and then went to see the wife of the hit-and-run driver. When she saw me, she seemed relieved rather than surprised. She told me that David had indeed hired someone to cause my parents' accident. 3 years ago, their youngest child was diagnosed with leukemia and urgently needed $30,000. That's when David approached them. They had struggled and hesitated but ultimately chose the wrong path, blinded by their love for their child. The $30,000 was transferred as promised. Excited, she withdrew the money only to be robbed on her way home, losing every cent. When she called David, she found he had blocked her. With no way to contact him, she was helpless. Unable to explain the source of the money, she didn't dare call the police and could only resentfully hold her child, cursing David. Their youngest child eventually died in her arms, and she lived aimlessly with her older child, waiting for the day I would find her. 30,000. You caused my parents' accident for your child's sake. I couldn't muster any pity for her. She smiled bitterly. I'm sorry. I've tried to make amends. I've told you everything I know. I turned off the recording and went to the prison. The man was visibly surprised to see me, his face a mix of guilt and resolve, but he remained silent. When I showed him the photos I had taken, his expression changed. What did you do to them? Where's my daughter? Why are they dressed so poorly? I looked at him with disdain, wondering how he had the audacity to ask such questions. Your family didn't get what they wanted. They were deceived. I said coldly. Impossible. Impossible. His shackles clanged as he struggled until I brought the recording closer. He finally slumped in defeat. I said nothing more, leaving the meeting room amidst his furious shouts. I want to retract my confession. I want to appeal. I'm not the one responsible. David, things are about to get interesting. Chapter 10. After staying home for half a month, David suddenly suggested a trip. Playing with my daughter, I didn't even look up, saying I didn't want to travel and just wanted to stay home with the baby. David grew anxious, and even my mother-in-law, who hadn't spoken to me in a long time, softened her tone. Anna, I'll take care of the baby. You two go enjoy yourselves. I snorted, not feeling grateful at all. Leave the baby with you? I'd rather leave her on the street and hope a kind soul adopts her. At least she wouldn't starve. My mother-in-law's eyes narrowed, her voice now more coaxing, perhaps nourished by love. Oh, Anna, I was just confused before. How could I harm my own granddaughter? I kept rocking the cradle, ignoring her. David grew desperate, coaxing me, and finally bought me a 30-gram gold necklace before I agreed to go hiking with him. He had little savings, and his face turned green when he bought the necklace, though he tried to act nonchalant. As soon as I put it on, he hinted eagerly. Anna, I've been eyeing a watch recently, but I've been tight on money and didn't want to bother you. In the past, I would have been touched and told him we were a couple and there was no need to be shy, then bought him the watch. Now, I just smiled sweetly and said, David, you're so considerate. I'm so lucky to have married you. His expression shifted, but perhaps thinking of the impending money, he forced a smile, driving us to the scenic area. As soon as we arrived, he excitedly told me about a thrilling path he wanted to take me on. Seeing through his obvious intentions, I didn't expose him and walked straight into the scenic area. Reaching a rugged area, his demeanor changed, replaced by a sinister look. Anna, what do you think would happen if you fell from here? I feigned fear. David, don't joke about such things. It's bad luck. Who's joking, you fool? He sneered. You're going to have an accident here, just like your parents. The three of you will be together, huh? Clutching my phone in my pocket, my knuckles turned white. No, David, don't joke about such things. You idiot. You don't understand, do you? You had a child with the person who caused your parents' accident and even doted on her. He laughed maniacally. From the first time I met your parents, I couldn't stand them. Just because they had some money and got me a job, they thought they could lecture me. I felt a chill in my heart. All the advice and care my parents had given him were seen as disdain. What good did it do? Everything your family had is now mine. He boasted, losing all humanity. Soon, I'll be living the high life. I shook my head. You won't have the chance. I already called the police on the way here. His face froze for a moment, then he laughed. This mountain is so big. How could they find us? You can't even lie properly. Police officers emerged from the dense forest behind him, tackling him to the ground. His smug expression turned to disbelief. I looked at him, shaking my head with a smile. There are things called trackers. David, you've lost. You'll end up with nothing. Chapter 11. With a complete chain of evidence against David, our divorce was finalized quickly. He was sentenced to life in prison for attempting to harm me for insurance money and for hiring someone to cause my parents' accident. An anonymous account sent Mrs. Johnson a video of Mrs. Smith and her husband in compromising positions. Mrs. Johnson beat Mrs. Smith so badly that she couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. Before she could recover, her husband in the countryside received the video and took her back to their hometown. I heard he sold her to a local drunkard known for his violence. I knelt at my parents' graves, bowing to them 3 times. I had found a reliable adoptive family for my daughter and would visit regularly. If I hadn't been too far along to terminate the pregnancy, I wouldn't have brought her into this world. Given her father's identity, I couldn't fully accept her, but letting someone else raise her would be better for her. I would do my best to provide for her, hoping she would grow up happy. I had sold our house, and the compensation for the 2 demolished houses was coming soon. I lovingly touched my parents' tombstone. Next month, I would board a plane to a foreign country to study fashion design, a passion of mine. After all, one must move forward in life.